I'm yawning, bro. What's up? Today I will be talking about screen time addiction. I used to have pause. I used to have a really bad screen time addiction. I could not go like 5 minutes or like 2 minutes without having something in my ear talking, like a podcast or YouTube video or whatever. And it was really bad. It was like actually taking over my life. And I would literally do nothing, and I was so addicted to it. I couldn't focus on anything. I felt like such a loser, and my whole life was like literally derooted, bro. I felt like I was going to be an absolute failure, but slowly but surely, thank God for people like Dr. K and like all those YouTubers. Like also, Emma Chamberlain for documenting the process of like screen time addictions and like making videos about that, because without them I would be in the same place and it would be awful. Yeah, I hated that, bro. So I'm making this for anybody who's addicted to technology and really wants to stop. I'm especially focusing, hold on, my hat's a mess. I'm especially focusing on short-term content because like reels and TikToks and stuff, because that's what I've been addicted to. Basically, what really is interesting, right, is that it's not considered an addiction and it completely derailed my life. So I felt like I was going crazy. But the second I started perceiving it as a legitimate addiction, I was actually able to sit myself down, give myself some grace, and look for solutions. And turns out I was actually right. It is a legit addiction. So even though it's not in the DSM 5, so DSM 5, for those who don't know, is like the Bible for psychology. Even though in the DSM 5 it's not written as an addiction, it is like, it checks out all the boxes. So it like, to have an addiction, you need to have a trigger, a compulsion, a repetitive behavior, and like the reward or whatever, and also difference like changes in the brain's structure, which as of recently, there's been this study on a bunch of Canadian teenagers, like a longitudinal study, I think, where they took them and they analyzed their screen time usage throughout their teen years, and they noticed the more prolonged screen time use they had throughout those years, the more ADHD symptoms they displayed, especially those of cognitive function, so like thinking, memory, and attention, which is literally like essential for having a working inner monologue and like having a voice in your head. No hate to those with ADHD. I have ADHD. I don't know if I already said that, but basically, it's really cooked because it's an actual addiction. So many people suffer with it, and it's not being treated or regarded as a legitimate addiction. And a lot of people have to hide this from people in their life because it's seen as like a weakness, when in reality, these apps, just like drugs, they're literally made to make people addicted the same way drugs are, for a profit. So that's my personal beef with the attention economy. And recently, 2026, like, oh my god, you're so analog, you have a flip phone, la la la. A lot of people are attempting to, it's become a status symbol basically, to not be like brain rotted and super addicted. So it's become a trend to have a flip phone and to go cold turkey, blah blah. I watched Emma Chamberlain's video about that, and honestly, I think she had a really good point. Because it is so essential and integrated in our day-to-day lives. So basically, you need a Microsoft account for work. Oh, too bad, you need a phone. Oh, you want to text your friends in the group chat? Yeah, too bad, you need an actual phone. There's like, it's really difficult to go from a phone to a flip phone that doesn't even work half the time, and the things that like, or Google Maps, there's so many functions that are actually incredibly useful. So she thinks that this whole flip phone thing is a fad and it's just a trend, right? And I unfortunately agree with her because I really wanted a flip phone. I started thinking about it. No, like I like texting my friends on iMessage and stuff, and I find the phone to be extremely convenient, not in terms of addiction, but just in terms of functioning, right? So I don't think cold turkey is going to work because, one, it's extremely inconvenient, and two, you have nothing to replace it with. So the end goal with a digital detox, or like not being addicted to screens anymore, is to no longer use the screens as often, right? But usually when you're doing a cold turkey, you have some sort of replacement method. So if you're someone who loves eating sugar, you replace those sugary sweets with something that's healthier that still is somewhat sweet. You know what I mean? Um, but in terms of actual screen addiction, you don't have anything to replace it with because the end goal is to not have anything to replace it with. The end goal is to be able to focus on things that used to be boring and for them not to be boring anymore. And that requires you to not use technology as much. Which basically leads me to my next point, which is cold turkey doesn't work from my experience. I'm not trying to be prescriptive, but it's kind of like cigarettes, right? So people who chain smoke, they smoke, they smoke, they smoke, they smoke. They can't stop. They want to stop, but they can't stop because their brain is addicted to a simultaneous amount of sensations, like the breathing in and out. That's very meditative. The nicotine itself, of course, and also having something in your mouth is kind of soothing, right? So a lot of nicotine addicts, what they do is they do a gradual thinning out process to eliminate their addiction. So some go on Nicorette and then they go to regular gum, and then suddenly they're not really craving that cigarette anymore, but they're craving the gum because they have something in their mouth and it reminds them of Nicorette, which reminds them of cigarettes, but they're not smoking, so they're off, right? And then there's people who use nicotine patches and they slowly, incrementally begin to lower their tolerance to nicotine, which proves to be a very effective way of getting rid of that kind of addiction that you ultimately, where the end goal is to not use it at all anymore. Oh my god, there's something in my contact lens. Hold up. Sorry. Disgusting. Okay. But I would think that screens is very similar to compulsively smoking cigarette, like chain smoking, because you're constantly scrolling and you want to stop indefinitely. So what I did was basically I did this thinning out process, but for me and my personal preferences, I basically took some principles from Atomic Habits and what's it called? Addictive psychology, basically what I was just talking about, and I integrated them to make this very custom tailored recovery program for myself, which this is key, by the way. If you want to quit something, you have to make a tailored quitting program for yourself and be honest about your strengths, your weaknesses, your preferences, and where you want to go, and give yourself some grace, and then use scientific evidence to support what you're trying to achieve. What I noticed is that someone with ADHD, you are more likely to fall into dopamine traps more during the night because your brain uses most of its dopamine earlier in the day because there's a fixed amount of dopamine. Shout out Dr. K again. And basically, I made a list of all the different chores that I prefer to do in the morning and all of those that I prefer to do at night. Tasks that I usually would procrastinate if I have a very low tolerance for things that are boring. So I prefer to work out at night. I prefer to clean my room in the morning, blah, blah, blah. Second of all, I had this plan. So what I did is my sister and I, we swapped phones and we made screen time passwords for each other. She had it on Instagram and YouTube, but she also doesn't have that ADHD need to constantly be entertained, but I do. So it's been a gradual process for me. First, I went off Instagram, right? And if you think about Instagram, it's all short form content. It's stories, 3 seconds, and then a reel, it's maybe a minute at the most, right? So it's like TikTok. It's very fast, and it's not good for your attention span. It fries it. So after I went off Instagram, I went on YouTube, and I started introducing my brain to long-term content like YouTube videos and so forth, and also reels. So I had that mix. I still had that compulsion to scroll on reels, which eventually a week later I was like, okay, I gotta get off YouTube. These reels are still using such huge amounts of my time. So week 2, quit YouTube, and I was stuck with Netflix. So what I did is I started, binging Netflix, but the thing about Netflix is that each episode is minimum 20 minutes, and I started watching the Jeffrey Epstein documentary, and then also the this show called One Day. It's really good. And I started basically training my brain to tolerate longer content, longer increments of focus. And at the same time, what I was doing during my day in the morning was I was writing essays about things I really liked, or I was playing music, but for like an hour and a half of hyperfocus. So if you have ADHD, try this. Try integrating hyperfocus while you're slowly like digitally detoxing, because what it does is that it erases that connection of, oh, long periods of focus equals boring. No, because if you're hyper focusing, it's super satisfying. And then also, if you're watching some passive content, like some long term content, then you're also training your brain to tolerate long periods of time without scrolling, or I don't know. Like basically focusing for long periods of time. And then that's where I'm at now. I noticed I was able to clean my room with like no music or podcasts, and it was extremely satisfying that I was able to accomplish that. Just me and my own thoughts. I'm starting to hear like inner monologue again and like thoughts in my brain better than I used to before, which is crazy because that wasn't a thing. I was always listening to something. And I feel so much more in control, and I feel like if I want to read a book, then maybe in 2 weeks I'll be able to read a book the more I go through with this process. But right now I'm in like stage 3. So I still have Netflix, but I've also noticed that music has become super like much more enjoyable to listen to, and I can prepare a meal without getting bored. You know what I mean? Like the things in our environment are meant to somewhat reward our brain. So when I make a meal, like I get satisfaction from feeling the different sensations instead of thinking about something else or listening to something else. So it's helped a lot, and I hope that this video provides some insight to people with ADHD or without. I think that the videos that were made about digital detoxes and stuff have been extremely helpful to me. So I think this is my way of giving back, and yeah, like give yourself some grace and talk about it with others. If you know other people that are struggling with screen addiction that really want to get off it, like share each other's strategies. My friends and I have been doing this, and same thing for like substances and stuff. So it's really great to have a community of people who struggle with the same issues to help you not feel as malfunctioning for having like a very human disorder. So much love. Peace out.